Today, I am very excited to welcome Philana Bouvier to the show. Philana is the president of Demeine Estates, where she's building one of the most dynamic portfolios in fine wine today. Our three key takeaways, and what we're really excited to dive into with you, Philana, are first, growth in a down economy is about precision. So disciplined portfolio focus, sharper channel strategy, reallocation of resources to the segments that really need it the most. Number two, demand generation is a structural need. So this might actually even mean leaving some markets, but distribution alone doesn't create velocity in maybe the way it once did. And number three, the enemy to all of this is friction. So wine is still pretty complicated for the consumer, operationally heavy for the trade. So what can we all do to make wine both easier to buy and sell?
Welcome to Masterclass U.S. Wine Market with me, Barbara Fitzgerald. In this show, we'll break down the complexities of selling wine in the U.S. by discussing the relevant issues of today with experts from around the globe. Each episode serves up three key insights to help elevate your winery's presence in the U.S. market. So grab a pen and paper and let's pave the way for your success in the U.S.
Welcome to Masterclass U.S. Wine Market. Today, I am very excited to welcome Philana Bouvier to the show. Philana is the president of Demeine Estates, where she's building one of the most dynamic portfolios in fine wine today. She's a respected leader across wholesale tier, having spent her career shaping how wine is brought to market with a really sharp focus on evolving consumer behavior and collaboration across the industry. She's also a really powerful advocate for inclusion and leadership development, driving real change in how the industry grows and who it empowers along the way. So, Philana, wow, what an honor. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate just the opportunity to share, and thank you for doing this.
It's really my pleasure. And thank you because, the time difference is such that it is very early morning where you are right now. So what a treat that you're giving us this time, this coffee chat.
Yeah, well, for those that work closely with me, my day starts at 4:00 in the morning every day. Oh. So 7 a.m. feels like lunch. So you're catching me at a good time.
We are birds of a feather. I am the same. I'm like, the earlier, the better, but don't ask to talk to me after 5 p.m.
Exactly.
All right. Well, before we dive into our discussion today, Philana, can you give us a little bit more about your background and how you ended up in the wine industry?
Absolutely. The wine industry pretty much found me. It was never something, I graduated high school at a really young age. I started life very, very young. And I kind of fell into the wine business. My first job was working for Anheuser-Busch, and I was part of their marketing team and merchandising. And I'm from Hawaii originally. So I was working at the Hawaii distributor Anheuser-Busch for about a couple years, and Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits actually entered the market at that time. And this was, back in, it was probably 20 years ago. And it was one of the greatest opportunities I had because I was able to make that segue from beer into wine and becoming a wine sales rep. And that was really my first introduction into wine and spirits, actually. It was with Southern. And I was a sales rep for the Waikiki route for about, I think, almost 3 to 4 years. And from there, that pretty much my career, I ended up moving back to California from Hawaii. I worked for Young's Market Company. And I did a number of different roles at the organization at Young's. And that really served me to be able to have the opportunity to get promoted. And they had made me, I was very, very grateful, at the time with the Underwood family. And they had promoted me to be the executive vice president, general manager for their wholesale division in Hawaii. So I was able to go back as a GM. And it was probably one of the greatest experiences of my life because it gave me this time where I had 5 years of running a wholesaler from A to Z, from, vertically across the board and understanding how to run a wholesaler. And it was 4 different warehouses. So I had to do warehousing, trucking, purchasing, pricing. I was, and you're wearing all these number of hats because it's a small market, but it was a big market because, I was only 35 years old when I did that role. So I hired a brand new team. I had my own, growth challenges and opportunities. And it taught me how to run a business at a very young age. And I also surrounded myself with some incredible like mentors and the people in the wine business and suppliers and just the people I hired. I always, felt it was, and to this day, you have to hire people that are much smarter than you. You cannot be the smartest person in the room because you're not able to learn. So you have to challenge each other. And, I always will miss Hawaii for that. I still have a home in Hawaii. And it was probably one of the greatest times of my career was actually running that wholesaler. And then, of course, I was promoted and I went back to California as the Senior Vice President of Business Development. And at the time, the Underwood family, they had me do all this new business and understanding what supplier business development is, which is such a key role, I will say, and something that I'll talk a little bit later, especially with the wholesaler, how important the value of a relationship is, especially when you're seeing all this distributor chaos that's going on and all these changes, because suppliers, they need to feel comfortable. They need to feel that their distributor and the person that's representing their business, their family legacy, knows them. And a lot of that has been lost, I think, since after COVID. But, I had that great opportunity to do that role as our senior vice president. R&DC came in, acquired Young's Market Company, and that's a whole nother, as we know, that has changed. But I was part of that transition and had the great opportunity to become their vice president of fine wine when they merged the companies and oversaw their fine wine for 22 states. And then COVID happened. And I had the great opportunity of meeting Carlton McCoy, who is my CEO and a great mentor of mine. And he runs Lawrence Wine Estates, and they were building a company called Demeine Estates, which is an import company. Lawrence Wine Estates is the 5th largest landowner in Napa. We own some beautiful legacy estates such as Heitz, Stony Hill, Burgess, Haynes. And he gave me an opportunity to be his president to run not only the sales and marketing, but to have Demeine Estates become an import company. And so that it's now been 5 years I've been in this position.
Amazing. What a journey.
I skipped over all the chaotic parts, but yes, it's definitely been a journey.
It hasn't just been luau's in Hawaii and, vineyard parties in California is what you're saying.
No, it's been a lot, it's a lot of hard work. I think when people ask about just in a career in general in wine is you have to take risks. And not every risk is going to be, yes, as you get older, you want them to be more calculated, but you got to take the risk and make the jump. And I've definitely made a lot of jump. And at the time when you're making those risks, it may not feel like you made the right decision, but you got to see it through. And I'm really glad that I had, but it wasn't easy. It was not easy.
Oh, well, thank you for that advice. We're going to invite you back for our career development episode for sure. But for today, as you've been speaking as president of Demeine Estates, you really sit at the center of supplier strategy, distributor execution, and just the reality of the market. So this gives you, Philana, a really clear view of what it actually takes to build demand and drive growth in today's U.S. wine market post-COVID, when you've really been taking on this role and growing your brand, your portfolio in the way you have. So with all of that in mind, our 3 key takeaways and what we're really excited to dive into with you, Philana, are first, growth in a down economy is about precision. So disciplined portfolio focus, sharper channel strategy, reallocation of resources to the segments that really need it the most. Number 2, demand generation is a structural need. So this might actually even mean leaving some markets, but distribution alone doesn't create velocity in maybe the way it once did. And number 3, the enemy to all of this is friction. So wine is still pretty complicated for the consumer, operationally heavy for the trade. So what can we all do to make wine both easier to buy and sell? So let's jump right into the good stuff.
We're going to solve the wine business.
We're going to do it all right now. I can't wait. Oh, great day. Well, as we said, number 1, focusing on the need to be more precise, to be more focused in this market. So what are you seeing right now at the shelf? Where is the resilience in this really challenging landscape?
Well, there's 2 things. 1 is about selection and 2 is price point. So there's so much noise about, are people abstaining from alcohol? Are they drinking less? People are healthier. That's normal, right? We understand that. I think the big thing that happened is COVID was a blessing and a curse to our business, because a lot of the suppliers at the time during COVID, they made big bets and they grew their production based on the timing of when COVID happened. And it gave everybody at the end, if you look back, and you have to be self-aware and say, especially in an organization, where did we make the mistakes? Did we produce based on an artificial growth? Because at the end, people ended up pulling back. And that pullback, if you look at the years in the wine business, it is very cyclical, right? And it's not, it is a moment for all of us where we have to make it easier for the consumer and the experience in purchasing alcohol easier, and also more, I think, more fun in a lot of ways and more interesting. So we're in the luxury wine business. So for us, luxury wine is actually over $50. If you were to ask any other major fine wine supplier that is a corporate fine wine supplier, they'll think that premium is over 25 or over 35. But in our company, it's at least plus 50. And if you were to ask my boss, he would say it was over 100. Is what real, because it is hard to sell expensive wine in a market like this. And it's about perceived luxury and what a bottle of wine and what the value that you're getting it for. So for us, where I see the resilience is these lower priced wines that don't really have storytelling. At the end, we're underestimating the consumer because there's not a lot of great wine to drink at that entry level price point. And the younger consumer knows now, right? They're more interested in what they're drinking. They're more interested in the ingredients. They want to know, what, is this good for me? And now information is so readily available. I mean, think about what's going on with AI. Think about all the things that are available, especially to a young person, is you have to be authentic in what you're selling. So I do think, and I have a lot of it's funny because we're in the wine business and I always make fun of it. It's like you see a young person, you're like, oh my God, you're young. Do you like to drink or not? That's not how you should be talking to young people. They don't want to be targeted and go, oh my goodness, they're just enjoying life. That's right. It's like, it's a different work-life balance than it was when we were younger. And we have to understand that and actually appreciate that. So I see the most resilience actually for the lower price wines, because they know that at the end of the day, if they're going to buy a bottle for $9.99, they're like, well, what's in this bottle and is it really real? I will say where I see loyalty is actually in the loyalty brands like a Heitz Cellar, which is actually, we're not a super big chain brand, right? We really lean towards on-premise and the luxury tier. We have, obviously some fantastic independent retail partners that we work with and we continue to work with, but we like to get to know not only the buyer, but we want to get closer to the customer. And so we've been able to see great success in that philosophy. And, I have to give a big shout out to my Senior Vice President of Sales, Andrew Dietz. He's doing an incredible job. He's moving extremely fast. And, our mantra at Demeine is speed and momentum and accuracy, and being able to get in front of the customer and work really closely with the supplier. You can't go back and forth. You have to have consistency when it comes to pricing. You can't have the price at one and then 3 months later you change the price again, because it becomes confusing. And that's where the confusion, and if you look at a young person, if they're looking up your wine and they see a year ago the wine was X price and today it's X price, they're going to question it.
What I'm thinking of when you talk about, these lower price point wines that are maybe struggling because of the lack of storytelling, lack of transparency, and people's ability to really find information nowadays, is that kind of a plug for wine should be more transparent about what's in the bottle, especially these brands at a lower price point?
I think this is very important and I want to be clear, wine is already transparent. So the winemaking process is very transparent. Anyone can look up how wine is made. You can, having a winemaker, especially for that winery and producer, is always available. For the lower priced wines, it is different, right? How they produce it. I mean, you're seeing, I think, all the rise of lawsuits going on with tequila. Is there blue agave in it, right? I mean, I think some of the challenges are more on the spirit side, being more transparent than it is on the wine side. Wine is an agricultural product, right? You know how it's made. You can come out here to the wineries, you can walk the vineyards, you can see all these things. And you could also do it similar to on the spirit side, being able to visit the distilleries. And I think having those experiences open to consumers to come and see what you're about is so important. And I love seeing the investment that both wine and spirit companies are making when it comes to going back to the estate and going back to the distillery, because that gives consumers an opportunity to actually see what you're about. And that's the place where you can actually have true storytelling.
Right. Well, what about, though, these brands that are maybe predominantly in on-premise only, they don't have a DTC program, they don't have a winery to visit. How are they building resiliency maybe with this younger crowd?
There's a lot of wonderful suppliers, because it's expensive, first of all, to have your own estate and your own, to run a DTC business. And you don't want to exclude, because there's some fantastic suppliers that work with the on-premise. And the challenge that we have with the on-premise is it is so expensive to go out to eat right now, right? We have inflation challenges. Food costs have gone up. I think the gas prices, everyone knows, hopefully it's temporary, but they have gone up. It's all affecting what's happening at the restaurant. And that's why having a wine and spirits program is important to a restaurant, because that's how a restaurant makes money, is through wine and spirits.
Right.
If you are a restaurant and you only have non-alcoholic wine and you're serving expensive food, it's going to be very difficult to make it through this time right now, because wine and spirits gives you the ability to have, a positive turn, and that's what pays, your food costs. We want suppliers like that to be involved in the on-premise and to have a voice, because that's how brands used to be built, was in restaurants and bars, right? Where you'd go to a restaurant bar and you would discover a really cool by the glass or a really cool cocktail. And you're like, wow, I never had it before. And I think it's important to get back to that. And it's all about moderation, which of course we completely enforce. Like, no one's saying, okay, we need everyone to drink a lot. What we're saying is getting back to socializing, getting back to the happy hour. Those things are good things, because you get to explore and discover new tastes and discovery through wine and spirits.
Yeah, that's such a great call out. But, discovery doesn't only happen via a tasting room or a wine road, but we got to look back to our restaurants and wine bars.
Yeah, and support the local community. I mean, think about, I was a server, and I mean, that's the first job you get out of college, is when you're working in a restaurant, right? As a bartender or a server, or you're in the restaurant field, or you get into it. And there's so many great things about working in a restaurant, because you're learning so many things at the same time, and you're multitasking and you're understanding operations. And, we're big supporters of the SOM community. This is actually very important for even our team, and my CEO is getting back to the roots of, selling wine on the floor and dedicating yourself. I had a great conversation. She's fantastic. She's the wine director up here at a really wonderful resort here in Napa Valley. And one of the things she said to me, and she's 30 years old, and she loves wine, and she's, obviously curated this beautiful fine wine list. But she says, if you bring in a wine that you understand and know, but not everyone may know about it, you have to commit to selling that wine on the floor. And this is the challenge that we have with fine wine, is we have fantastic somms that understand fine wine and are able to bring in the wine. But at the restaurant level, there's they're doing 20 different things, right? They're filling another position, they're behind the bar. There's not enough resources for them to be able to actually sell the wine and commit to the wine on the floor. And you have to be able to hand sell some of these things to a customer. And imagine if you and I go into a restaurant and you have someone that's like, oh my God, I had this beautiful, you're looking for something cool, and they're able to talk to you about it. You're going to try it. And so that's, I think getting back to our roots and understanding education and having fine wine accessible at a wine by the glass price is a great way to learn and discover new things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to talk a lot more about these on-premise tips, which I know you have some really great insights on that in just a moment, but I just want to ask a couple more questions about this first takeaway about the need for focus at the moment. What are kind of the common mistakes, or maybe even uncommon mistakes, or lesser known mistakes you see suppliers making right now in this slower economy?
Panicking. Like, you can't panic during this time. You have to be calm. It's, changing price, not having a clear direction on your pricing strategy. That's really important. And I think it's about trusting your team. If you hire a sales team, you have to be able to trust that sales team that they're going to do the very best job they can and get the maximum value out of a bottle of wine and a price to not only to the retailer, but also in understanding the perceived value to the customer. And a lot of the challenges that we see, look, I think it's important I'm a supplier now. I was a distributor for almost 20 years. Now I'm a supplier. And I've learned both sides. And you have to kind of take the mistakes of not only you make on yourself, but also of others, and just go, you know what, I want to learn and grow from this and be able to be self-aware. And the biggest lesson I think any supplier can learn from is you cannot panic. And if you go down to the deepest discount, you cannot survive and come back from it. You have to be able to ride this wave, and you got to stay resilient, and you have to forward invest, which means, yes, it's going to be tough for the next couple of years, but you have to hold price. And I think consistency is really key right now. You have to remain consistent. If you're going back and forth on strategy and you're not able to stay consistent, it can actually hurt the overall, what's happening at the retail level, and especially on the on-premise level too.
So what is it then, in terms of discipline, in terms of this focus, should the producers really be thinking about right now? I would say, since this is the Italian wine podcast and we're talking about selling wine in the US, should they really be focusing on when presenting to retail?
Oh yeah, don't be too precious. This is something I tell our suppliers all the time. And what I mean by that is, it's not about, if you have X amount of wine and you're allocating it, and you want to sell it for a certain price. But I think what happens is we get hung up on a certain price, and it becomes like an identity crisis for some people. We're like, oh my God, my wine is worth $500. And I'm saying, by the way, this is an example. No, let's sell it for $350, right? And they're struggling with that. It's like, okay, well, you're going to hold on to this inventory for the next 3 years, or you can sell it still at a premium cost. It's still going to be difficult. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but you got to be willing to take that risk. And what happens is, if you become too precious about things, you end up missing the opportunity. We get, I think wine is a very sensitive, especially fine wine, it's very sensitive, right? We get so passionate, and just for the Italians, I mean, our producer will say this, we get into some really fun, passionate discussions all the time. And and I am saying the word passion because they're just, it's their family legacy, and they want to make sure that, we're doing the right thing, but you got to have trust. And that's so important, right? Once the trust is gone, it's like, it just becomes this fight, and you have to be transparent and honestly sell to everyone. If someone wants to buy a bottle of your wine and they're willing to pay for the price, don't turn your nose at it and be like, oh, that's not the venue that I think I want to be at. I want to be at X venue. It's because younger consumers are showing up everywhere to buy wine, and you have to be available and you have to be present.
That's such a great piece of advice, because that kind of exclusivity model did work for a little while. Like, you were impossible to find, but now
you don't want to be impossible to find. Yeah, you want to be able to look, and I get it. That model works really well with Hermes, right? And Hermes Birkenbag. I understand, luxury, it's something that you have to work towards. But if you are still building your brand in the United States, not everyone knows your family history. And I think a lot of the mistakes that suppliers make is they automatically think that, everybody knows who you are, and they actually don't. And we have to, and it's okay, right? And I think they just get very sensitive about it. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm just like, not being honest with you, like, nobody really knows who you are yet. So you have to work and invest in the US market and put the time in. And it takes years. It's not an overnight thing.
Right, exactly. And even with an example like Hermes, like, sure, you might wait 7 years or whatever to get a Birkin bag, but you could walk into an Hermes shop and buy a scarf tomorrow.
That's correct.
There has to
right?
be something that's still accessible.
You have to make it easy on the customer too, right? So they have a system where you can work towards it. But if you have a beautiful wine and someone wants it and you're like, no, I don't want to sell it to this person because, I don't like the storefront or I don't like where the store is located but the younger consumer is buying wine everywhere. And so you have to be available everywhere. That is my philosophy. Not everyone may agree with it, but that's what I
love it. Okay, last question on this subject. What gives you right now the confidence to kind of put more support behind or give more space to a particular wine over another?
We don't play favorites because I think that's, as I mentioned before, we're sensitive. So we definitely don't play favorites. You have to look, and this is the importance of working with, let's say, an account. At the end, you want your regional salesperson to work on behalf of the account, not on behalf of them selfishly. And that is the difference between great service and bad service. You have to do your homework. So if you're calling on an account, you got to be able to study the account, look at the wine list, see what their wine program is, and be able to make recommendations based on what their wine program is and what would be a great addition. Not selfishly, okay, this is good for me. And, this is, I think there was another conversation I had, a funny story where this wine director I was talking to, she was like, oh yeah, this guy came in and he sold me on his, non-alcoholic wine, which was fine. But it wasn't that type of restaurant where you could do that. So unfortunately, that person wasn't thinking like, oh, what's the best recommendation I can make for her wine program? It was, oh, this works for me. And so you have to be able to understand what that wine program and what they need. And you make the recommendation based on what's best for their business. And you have to do it selflessly, not selfishly. And that, to me, is the greatest opportunity that both distributors and suppliers have. There's so much distributor chaos going on right now and supplier chaos where people don't have a home to go to. They don't have a distribution strategy because there's so much consolidation happening. And so the best thing you can do for the customer is make it easy on them where they can trust you and you know that you have their back when it comes to needing something that makes them money.
Yeah, I love this approach. It almost sounds like, supplier distributor is in this hospitality role, offering like this beautiful customer service because the restaurant is their customer.
Yeah, think about it. So the restaurant right now, imagine you're a restaurant in California. R&DC just went out of business and it's being acquired by Reyes. And then your Tito's is now distributed at another distributor, which is fine. Then you have your wines that you used to have is over at another distributor, and that's Regal, or it's Breakthrough, or it's Southern. So now let's say you just started a new job and you're now the wine director at a major hotel in Southern California, and you're going through the purchasing list and you're like, and you don't know the internal what's going on out there. You're brand new to the industry. You actually just came from Saks Fifth Avenue, which, by the way, just consolidated, right? So you're coming out of the industry into a job. You have stuff going on, right? So there's everyone's got stuff going on in their lives. Yeah. They're trying to learn a new job, and you don't even know how to buy your stuff. And then you get a salesperson like myself that comes in, and I'm like, you know what, Barbara, I'm going to help you out. I just look at your wine list. You know what? I'll tell you what you need to do. You need to get this from there. And you create their buying list, not on behalf of what's best for me, but to help you out. So that way it makes your job easier and you end up earning the buyer's trust because, right, you earn the buyer's trust and it has nothing to do with you trying to gain another by the glass or another, cocktail on the list. And it makes it easier because we have to make it, this is a very tough time right now. Think about what's going on in the wine business. Everything that is possibly going wrong in the wine business is happening right now. Everything. Yeah. You have a war, gas prices, people aren't drinking. Western Europe, there's this whole global political climate going on with, wine. We can't sell wine in Canada. There's so many different things going on. And then, of course, stuff that's going on in people's lives. So you want to make it easier for people and earn that trust. And, I think this is so important. Distributors and suppliers have such a great opportunity right now to provide the best service and to build the greatest relationships right now, because that's what people need, not to be sold to.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're talking about is true relationship building, looking at the people that you work with empathy and figuring out how to meet their needs where they are in that moment.
Absolutely.
Well, this is a great way to segue, I think, to start to talk about this demand generation, because hopefully a positive, healthy relationship like that helps to build that. So in this market, really, just brand awareness alone isn't enough. We have to focus on actually generating demand, which looks very different in on-premise versus off-premise.
Right.
So you've spoken to this a little bit already, but what makes a wine successful on a restaurant list versus at a shelf? And where do you see suppliers misunderstand the differences?
So, the chain business is a tough business. So I'll talk retail first, right? And there's two different kinds of, obviously, businesses in the chain is independent retail, which is the independent on off-premise accounts, your favorite liquor store that you like to go to down the street, your neighborhood store. And then you have the major grocery chains, right, which is the Safeways and Total Wines, Costco's of the world. You have to be able to sell differently to both. If you are a small niche fine wine supplier, it's actually more important to grow your business in the on-premise before you take it to the chains. Because if you sometimes what happens is that people get overly excited and they place their wines too quickly in the chain business. But if it doesn't have the consumer pull on the shelf, it will get discontinued and you can't get back in. So once your brand's discontinued, you can't get back in. So it's a short-term win a lot of the times. And when I was at the wholesaler, this is where I learned this actually the most, is a lot of our suppliers would come in, we'd have our, distributor meetings, and they're like, we want to get into the chains. They're excited. And, Safeway decides to bring in one of their SKUs and they order, 28 cases right away. Well, if you don't have a plan to move it off the shelf, you don't have that consumer awareness, then what happens is the chain brings it in, but they go off of turns off the shelf, and then obviously what rings at the stand. And if it doesn't pull through, it's going to get discontinued on the next wave. So you don't want to get overly excited. Yes, it's a short-term win. You get it on the shelf, but then what are you going to do afterwards to support the retailer? And you have to do tastings. You have to do displays. You have to find out what's appropriate. What's the legal way to sell it? It's more complicated. And you need to hire a team that is experienced and understands that chain and understands that relationship and is working closely with the buyer. So that's an investment. Then you have the on-premise. The on-premise is actually, to me, still the best way to build a wine brand, because you have trial and you have by the glass pricing. But you have to invest into that pricing. It's marketing to get it on the list, because there's only so many glasses of wine that they're going to sell on a wine list. And then you have to be able, but the next thing you do is you have to do education. You have to get to know the floor somms. You have to come in and do a tasting. So both take a lot of education, but both take a lot of investment. There's no such thing as like, okay, this is the way you do it. There's no such thing as a shortcut, especially when it comes to this. You have to be able to understand both different strategies and what's going to work and be prepared to invest into those strategies.
I'm thinking here a little bit about on-premise, and you mentioned earlier the rising cost of going out to eat in the U.S. What are you seeing happen then with by the glass prices, and is there anything that can be done about it to continue to encourage this trial?
Yeah, it's expensive. I think internally, even with our own conversations with our teams, we work with the distributors in order to, share in the cost in supporting a buy the glass program. I think there should be more of it. And it takes a lot of distributor management and experience to be able to get your distributor to work down their margin a little bit. I am also working down my own margins and being able to say, you know what, let's partner together to support a restaurant program. This is an ongoing conversation. I can already, see the looks on some of my wholesale friends' faces going, of course, Philana wants to take down the distributor's margin. It's a collaboration. And it takes a lot of preparation, and you have to be able to develop a strategy and work with your wholesaler to do that. It's tough right now on the restaurant, and I understand their side because of all the rising costs. They have to raise the by the glass pricing in order to cover their costs. Has it been too aggressive over the last few years? Yes, it has. And I mentioned this before on something else that I spoke at, is having the larger corporate chains in the on-premise, the bigger restaurant chains, they should come together and partner and actually make it more affordable for that premium by the glass consumer that's coming, sitting at the bar, and actually invest themselves. And I think if you have someone like that leading that conversation, we can start seeing that happen, because it's such a great opportunity. Because what you're doing is, if you have an expensive by the glass, which is understandable, you're only going to get one glass, maybe, that that someone's gonna try at the bar or have with their dinner. But if you do something that's more affordable, you're going to go through more wine. You'll drink one, two, a couple more glasses, right? You'll try a bottle of wine. As a consumer, you become more comfortable, and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to continue to enjoy this wonderful, by the glass.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know, when you go out and drink, think about it, right? If you see something that you like, but if you see a by the glass that's $80, are you going to buy it? No.
maybe on my birthday, if it's like great champagne on my birthday.
If it's great champagne,
but other than that,
if it's a Philipponnat Clos de Grace, yes, right?
Yeah.
But that of course. But think about it. I mean, it's difficult, right? There's not a lot of places that can do that. You want us to offer something affordable. And the whole point of what by the glass is an entry-level point or an exploration point for someone to enjoy something that they've never had before, and you can discover new things, and you'll remember those things.
Yeah, it's back to that need for discovery, because we all talk right now about how people are drinking less wine, but it kind of begs the question in this rising cost environment, is it the wine or is it the price of the wine?
It's expensive to go out and drink right now. I mean, that's a real reality. Anyone that says it's not expensive is not being realistic. Everything is more expensive right now, and it's unfortunate, and it is, people have to cut back. But it's interesting because I see people spending more money on things that they perceive is worth the price, right? People are spending more money on an expensive seat on a plane because they want the experience of a nice seat on a plane. People are spending more money on travel and wellness resorts because they see the perceived value, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to save my money and spend 3 days here. It's going to be more expensive, but I know what I'm getting back. So to us, for the wine industry, we have to do a better job of coming together to create what that value is. And that to me is really important, because the wine business, there's been so many attacks on the wine business, but wine isn't going anywhere. It's about togetherness, and it's about socializing, and it's about just, relaxing and enjoying and having that moment where you get to just, end your day with a beautiful glass of wine. These are not bad things to do. This is right. There's a lot going on with our personal days and our jobs, that you want a time to be able to, like, open up a nice bottle and just be like, oh my God, this tastes great. And just kind of soak it in. And there should be nothing negative about that.
Right. Absolutely. I think this is a really good segue into my next question, which, do you think that producers are appropriately investing in on-premise education and staff engagement at the moment?
There can always be more, always. My boss is really famous for saying that, like, there's always more that you can do. And I think there's definitely more. I do see, there's a great light at the end of the tunnel here, because I was just down in Santa Monica. We had a really great experience down there at one of the hotels, and I was talking to one of the SOM directors there. And it was great to see this community of SOMs that care so much about service. And, they're opening new restaurants, and, they're excited to show off their list, and they're finally, also the restaurant has to provide the resources for the SOM to do that, right? For them to be able to work the room, and you have to invest in fine wine. And, I'm really blessed. I work with, Carlton, he's so passionate. He actually leads the charge in somm education and getting back to his roots and taste and doing these tastings. And I get to witness it, right? And I learn from it.
Yeah.
And we also have Eric Elliott, who's also an MS, and he's our estate director for Heitz. And, we're passionate about fine wine. And I think getting passion and having that in a glass is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you think of an example of a really effective collaboration between like supplier, distributor, retailer, restaurant? Do you have anything in your book of wisdom to share on that?
The wholesale business is something that's very close to my heart because I grew up in the wholesale business. I'm a fierce advocate of the 3-tier system. It's extremely important. You can't get around it. I know everyone tries to, but you just cannot. And you have to accept and also embrace what they can do. And it's also can be frustrating at times because, just like any other large companies, you have to be able to manage it closely. And it can be frustrating and difficult, especially for someone that doesn't have any wholesale experience. Coming from my years of doing that business and into this role, the most important lesson I've learned is you have to really collaborate with them and be transparent and come to them. And it's also about humility, right? They don't need to be beaten down because they get beaten down every day. The wholesale business is a tough business because you're going from, you're putting out fires all day long, right? You're either a hero or you're not, from one supplier meeting to the next. And I think also too, they get in their own way, right? They need to invest in fine wine, and that's important because they have to continue to do that. I look at what's going on, especially across the board, and a lot of it is in what's happening, with beer distributors and wine distributors, and they're, consolidating with each other. But a beer salesperson cannot sell fine wine unless they make the transition and do this education and the investment in themselves. I came from beer, but I invested in myself to learn fine wine. You can't just hire somebody and just go, okay, by the way, you're going to sell. It's a completely different selling strategy and mindset. And anyone that thinks that you can intertwine the two will not have a successful business. Because at the end, that beer person or let's say someone that's selling, something that's fast moving and it's an RTD or whatever it may be, they don't understand the level of service that a wine director may need at a restaurant. They need to come into that restaurant, understand, look at the wine list, right? It's not like, oh, by the way, do you have, X beer here? I'll just fill your order. They actually have to do the homework. And so for all this consolidation that's going on with, the wholesalers, one thing I'll say is like, you got to invest in your team. And if you try to get someone at a bargain or you go cheap and you're not able to invest in a team that understands fine wine, you will not be successful at it. That I know for a fact.
Yeah. And what I've heard you say a couple times, correct me if I misheard, but it's really with every level of the value chain that you work with, you have to understand the needs of that level and try to work with them because, you're not trying to push your needs on them. That's like a surefire way to end a negotiation, right?
And, a lot of suppliers make the mistake because of all the challenges that they're having financially. They'll add on to a bottle of wine. It's probably more expensive than it needs to be because of all the stuff that's going on internally with an organization. And then they're pushing it down on their salespeople, and their salespeople are like trying to push it onto the customer, and the customer is going to retreat, right? They're going to be like, wait a second, is this a good idea? We have an opportunity to be the best business partners that we can be for our customers. And, we have some great relationships with some large clients right now that I've had to go out and really cultivate with our team because in this environment, you have to be nimble and you have to be able to uncover new sales outlets. There's not that many outlets to go to right now. So you have to either work with the outlets that you have and in addition to that, discover new ones. And in order to continue to build current relationships at this buyer level, you need them to buy more. But they're not going to buy more from you if you can't provide a reason that's good for their business. And I think that is the biggest fundamental difference that we all have an opportunity to do more of. We got to make sure that we help the customer as much as possible, because even though it's hard for us, it's even harder for them.
That's such a good call out. And a really good segue into this last takeaway that we have, which is all about reducing friction. So where are you seeing the most friction show up today? Is it pricing tiers, label language, logistics, all of the above?
It's logistics and warehousing. Shipping a case of wine has gotten more expensive. Warehousing is very complicated. All the different surcharges that shipping companies are putting on us right now is extremely painful. And, all these price increases that are happening, just, these knee-jerk reactions when it comes to logistics because of, and all the fees that people are charging. And I think it's, we understand, we get that. But when you charge a small company such as ourselves a surcharge that we don't have budgeted for, that's what hurts small businesses. We have to be able to plan for those things too. Tariffs have been really, really tough on the industry because, we didn't plan for those tariffs at the start of it. And so if you think about these small fine wine suppliers and these import companies, now all of a sudden you're getting hit with a $75,000 tariff bill. How can you plan for that? It's very difficult. So those are the biggest challenges right now in running a business, is all of these charges that companies are so quick to do, because they're trying to also offset their costs. But at the end, who hurts the most is the customer.
Yeah. I mean, you have to protect your cash flow in this moment, right? But maybe people are overcorrecting and doing that in a way that is
too aggressive.
Detracting from the sale. Let's talk a little bit, especially, again, talking about European wines being sold in the U.S. market. Are we overcomplicating, labels, regions? And if so, what do we do about that when this, European system relies on regional distinction, but U.S. markets don't always grasp the differentiation?
Yeah, you got to make it clear and simple. You have to make it, I think sometimes we get too precious about a wine label. Everyone loves to change a wine label. We understand that. That's great. But when you change a wine label, you got to register it all. And it's like starting all over again. Right? There's registration fees. There's all these things that happen that you have to do in order to get that wine sold through the marketplace. And so those things need to be kept in mind, and being able to have clear communication in what you want on a label. I believe in, look, the label is a 24-hour salesperson. It has to show off on a shelf. The back label has to be clear. You can put the story on the back label. Having a QR code is also great, but keeping it simple. That's the most important thing. I mean, we have a running joke. I'm obviously, I think maybe it's because of I'm getting into a little more mature now, is like tiny fonts. You never see those things on social media where, like, in your 20s you were like partying, and then now in your 40s and 50s you're like, you have to have a flashlight and a pair of glasses to look at the menu. It's like the tiniest, I don't know what it is right now. Everyone's into tiny fonts. It's very difficult to read.
I was actually talking recently to somebody over at Nielsen, and she was saying, we don't teach cursive in schools anymore, and we haven't for a while. And a lot of people aren't going to be able to read cursive anymore. And a lot of wine labels are in cursive. So maybe the need to rethink that.
Yes. It's just, we get to, and again, romantic copy is important as long as it's short and concise. You're going to lose the person right away. And also just remember, you can just pull it up on ChatGPT now. You don't really, we don't need to be so precious about things anymore, because it's just so widely available. I think for me, it's like, make it easy to read. You can see it. It's got a beautiful label. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. And an interesting question, I think, are we kind of overestimating how much education consumers actually want? Or maybe are we kind of underestimating the format that they want in it? Like, where do you stand on consumers and their desire for education?
I think consumers want education. I think consumers don't like to be lied to. They want the truth, right? And what happens is that you have a millisecond, like literally a millisecond. They can look it up and they can know automatically if you're being disingenuous about your branding. So it's important. I think we underestimate the consumer. They are smart. They know the difference. They know when something tastes different. They know when they're being sold to, and they know when they're being lied to. And I also think more than anything, the younger consumer, they're very intelligent. They want things that are real, and they can easily, again, it's a millisecond, they can look it up. So we have to do a better job, everybody in this industry, on educating the younger consumer. But you don't want to be, I mean, again, no one wants to be educated and felt like they're being lectured, right? There's nothing, right? I mean, there's nothing worse than being like mansplained. Like, some older generation that's like, let me tell you how to drink wine. It's like, listen, buddy, I got it, right? So that to me is like really important. And no younger person wants to feel like you all are smart. Like there's no, like you don't need to be talked to like you're 5 years old. This is so silly to me. I think to me, it's about just being straightforward. I am a very straightforward, probably too blunt of a person, but life is short. And at the end of the day, you don't want to waste anybody's time. And I think educating the consumer, do it in an authentic way and just be yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, that's how you're going to attract the customer that is meant for you anyway, by being authentically yourself.
Just be yourself. That's all you have to be.
Yeah. Okay, if you could remove one barrier in the U.S. wine ecosystem right now, what would it be?
Close-minded buyers. And I say that in a positive way. You know, the wine industry, we're always talking about how we need to develop, change, transform, you know, get into the new generation, improve the way we communicate. Well, that also has to happen on the buyer's side, right? If you're hiring people that, I think it's great. You have years of experience. You've been doing this for 25 years, but they only think within this box. We also need buyers to think outside of the box and to be open to some of these new ideas, right? And to try different things and to take that risk with the supplier and to have that trust. And what's challenging is when you're hiring, you know, again, it's all about people. If you're hiring within this box and that person doesn't have the experience, but they're willing to try different things, that's awesome. But if they don't have the experience and they're not willing, it's harder on us because you can't, you know, it's like at the end result is actually how do you get this amazing bottle of wine in front of a consumer? Well, it takes all these different channels to do it, right? It takes a supplier that understands how to sell to the buyer. It takes the buyer to take that risk. It takes the supplier to invest into the account to make sure there's education. It takes the buyer to accept that investment into education. You know, it's a 50-50 relationship. It takes both. Yeah. It has to be collaborative. And so, you know, I've been doing this for so long, and I think there are some buyers out there that are just like, absolutely, no, I'm not doing it. It's like, but why? You know, why not try? Yeah. And I think being open-minded about things can be so freeing. Look, it's about calculated risks, and you don't want to lose money, and you want to do the right thing for the customer and for your business always. But you have to also be open-minded because we can't change the wine industry if we're not more open-minded.
Yeah, I think that's such a great call out. This is, you know, what many of the challenges are pointing to a need for innovation. Yes. So we have to be willing to think outside of the box. We have to be willing to do things differently than it once has. And I know how hard that can feel for somebody that this is their heritage, their family, et cetera. But this is also survival.
Yeah, it's survival. And it's being creative. You got to be creative in how you sell, how you approach, how you do things, and you have to be nimble. And you got to be open to those things. You know, it's fun to me, right? To try different things and to do things. Yeah. It's tiring on my team probably, but
but that's why you're doing well. Taking chances, finding. I think that's another important call out. You know, the calculated risks, not willy nilly. Yes. But yeah, being willing to step over a line that no one else has yet.
Right. And take responsibility for it. Look, not everything's going to work. You have to go into it knowing, you know what, I could be making a mistake here. And if you make the mistake, you own the mistake, you learn from it, and you move on, right? You try not to make another mistake again. I always say, don't make the same mistake, right? But you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that Silicon Valley mindset, fail fast and often.
I'm a big believer.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could keep you here all day, but I will be respectful that you probably have a lot of work to do. So we'll start to wrap it up. But here on our podcast, we like to end with a rapid fire quiz where we ask 3 questions just to help really solidify everything that we talked about today for our listeners. So just answer in a couple sentences if you can. But number 1, I mean, we are already in Q2, but what is your number 1 tip for mastering wine sales in 2026?
Relationship building, like really understand your customer, know your business, always learn, always be learning, always learn from others. And to me, I love it's about speed and accuracy, just, getting ahead of it. I think that's so important. The wine business, being a salesperson in wine is very difficult, but it's still a relationship business. You cannot treat it as anything else other than that. It's still about the relationship.
Yeah, great answer. Okay, number 2, what is something you would have told your younger professional self about working in the U.S. wine industry?
It's still the best industry to be in. Think about it. You meet the most fun, amazing, beautiful people like yourself in the wine industry. There is no other industry in the world where it allows you to travel, experience, see different things, walk in a vineyard, right? Feel the soil, feel storytelling, see it in person, see it from the beginning all the way to where it gets to the shelf or to the restaurant. There's no other business like that. And then on top of that, you have to dine, eat, drink. To me, it is the greatest business in the world. It is the greatest business.
Incorporates all the beautiful aspects of life, right?
It does. It has all the senses, right?
Yes.
It's all the senses.
Yes. All right, number 3, where is your favorite place to drink wine in your hometown, which right now is Napa, correct?
Yeah, well, is Burgess up on the terrace. I'm there a lot. I love the team there at Burgess. They're like family to me. That the entire staff there is just, they're really, really wonderful people. And I am there quite often. So it is my favorite place to have a glass of wine because that view, it overlooks the Heitz Trailside Vineyard is stunning.
Oh, beautiful. All right. Now I'm going to, I live in Kenwood, so I'm going to have to go
come over.
Have wine there. Yes. Oh, Philana, thank you again so much for all this generous time you've given us. If anybody wanted to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
You can email me at philana@demeineestates.com, DEMEINE estates.com. And also you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram at Philana Bouvier.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. And I will look forward to seeing you in person in the near future.
All right, thank you. I'll see you in Verona.
Yes, can't wait. Ciao.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Masterclass US Wine Market. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to stay up to date with the latest industry trends, remember to like, follow, and share our podcast. And if you find value in our conversations, please leave us a review to help others discover the show and grow our community. Stay tuned for new episodes every Monday. Until then, brindiamo il vostro successo!